Good evening, everyone. It's just turned 7, so I'm ready to start. I'm going to start the meeting with a traditional reminder to turn your microphone on, as I just forgot to do when you speak. And the first item on our agenda tonight is the appointment of Vice Chair for 24-25. So does anyone have any nomination for the appointment of Vice Chair? Councillor Nichols.
Yes, I'd like to nominate Councillor Calvin Horner for the role of Vice Chair.
Seconder. Councillor Swainston. Would you like to say anything other than?
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for the post of Vice Chair? No? In that case, please can we have a show of hands to indicate whether you support the appointment of Councillor Horner as Vice Chair? So all those in favour? Any against? And any abstentions? No, that's carried. Councillor Horner, would you like to come and join me? Moving on. Item 2, apologies. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. Apology from Councillor Boylan and Councillor Williamson is substituting, and also from Councillor Cox and Councillor Watson is substituting. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3, minutes of the meeting on the 5th of March 2024. Members, we have the minutes from that meeting held on the 5th of March before us. Are members content for me as Chair to sign these minutes? Councillor Nichols.
I've got a slight amendment, if that's okay. On page 8, I was taught at the bottom of the page, last paragraph, I was talking about UK SPF Prosperity Fund, and I was talking about Aspendon Parish Council and not Huntingford Town Council, just as a matter of. Thank you. Quite important. Yeah.
Sure, I'll see if there's any other amendments. Yes. Any other amendments or comments on the minutes? So are we prepared to accept the minutes as with the proposed amendment? Can I have a proposer for that, please? Councillor Nichols and a seconder. Councillor Swainston. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? 3 abstentions. That's carried. Item 4, welcome from me. No other comments other than to welcome anyone watching on the webcast. Item 5, declarations of interest. Do we have any? Councillor Buckmaster.
Thanks, Chairman. I think I ought to declare I'm Chairman of Herts Waste Partnership and also Cabinet Member for the Waste Disposal Authority, which also negotiates for some contracts for waste, fibre and green waste. And of course, in that knowledge, they will influence some of my views. So it was worth my while mentioning that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor McAndrews.
Yeah, Deputy Executive Member for Environment at County Chair. Thank you.
Any other declarations? Then we move on. Item 6, award of the waste recycling and street cleansing contract. I'm going to ask Councillor Hoskin to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. So the report in front of you this evening seeks overview and scrutiny's consideration of the work which has gone into preparing for the award of the waste, recycling and street cleansing contract. North Herts Council are the lead authority in our partnership and will be considering a similar report and will seek similar recommendations prior to award of the contract from their cabinet. So the waste recycling and street cleansing service represents the largest spend on services contracts each financial year for this council. It's a high profile service which impacts on residents every week. And as well as having a huge impact on the council's finances, it also has significant impacts and influences on the council's ability to achieve its carbon reduction and sustainability aims for the district by reducing waste and recycling more, reducing the carbon impacts of sending residual waste to landfill or energy from waste facilities. This subject was last discussed by this committee on the 30th of November 2023, after the initial tenders that were received indicated that there were some affordability issues from the services in the next contract. Following discussion at that meeting, Executive agreed the service design options on the 21st of December 23, and those have since been taken forward with the intention of supporting the long-term financial sustainability of the service and the council. Officers have now completed a competitive dialogue process and are seeking a decision from Executive on Tuesday next week, the 9th of July, on the award of the contract to the preferred bidder. This paper also seeks agreement to three further recommendations which affect the service mobilisation and are required for the successful delivery of the services in 2025. I'm not going to go through the paper, but just to draw your attention to one particular point. In October last year, the government issued a consultation on the proposed statutory guidance to support the simpler recycling proposals which are developed from the Resources and Waste Strategy in 2018. Some elements of the draft guidance are not aligned with the service changes due to be implemented in this contract in 2025, in particular in relation to the frequency of residual waste collections. Given that councils have been waiting since 2018 for clarity on waste and recycling changes resulting from the Resources and Waste Strategy, it would be prudent to not delay the decision any longer in the hope that a final clarification will come in 2024. That's not thought to be possible or likely. Officers therefore recommend a decision is made based now on the government response received to date. And the councils have sought independent legal advice from Sharp Pritchard regarding our need to take regard as to the yet unpublished guidance, and this is contained in Appendix 8. It's legal privilege, and if we want to discuss that, then we'll have to treat that as part of Part 2 and change the structure of the session. Critical part of this process is the scrutiny of these proposals by elected colleagues, and we welcome your comments and questions. There are 4 recommendations, which I can read out if you like, or we can, fine. So I hand back to you. Thank you.
There are some commercially confidential and or legally professionally privileged information contained within appendices 1 and 8 of the report. And if members wish to discuss that content, then we'll need to move to exclude the press and so on. I'm sure you knew that. So who would like to start us off? Councillor Buckmaster.
Thanks, Chairman. Just wanted to start by saying I'm broadly in agreement with the approach and the design and the proposals. And the reason for that is we need to move forward because while across Hertfordshire we are the best for recycling across the eastern region, there are variances across county. There are some that have, or 2 districts have recycling rates up in the 60s, and I think we're just below 50. The average is around 52%. I think the main reason for that is the absence of food waste collection, which will be addressed within the next 2 years, certainly by the time we get around to that. And I do appreciate the sentiments around 3 weekly residual waste collections. My interpretation of what I've read in the past is that, yes, very strong guidance by the government, but it kind of left it open for having good reasons not to do 2 weekly collections. So I would say that we have good reason to do that. And the other thing is that the change in design, I feel, will help us get those recycling rates up, but also the carbon content down, because going into the next few years, and not everyone will know about the elements here, but the emissions trading scheme. So while the default for residual waste in the county to go to energy for waste, to incinerators. Over the coming years, I think around 2028, I'm looking at Chloe, that there will be an emissions trading scheme whereby the providers of those services will then have to buy permits, and those will then have knock-on effects and will actually end up being quite expensive across the board. And I think that will have implications for all of us. So, I mean, I might say a few other things later on. Oh, there are, yeah, a couple of challenges. I think the additional bin for fibre is going to be a challenge for some people. And I think the fact that over a 6-week period, there will be no 2 weeks that will be the same. So I note in the report that there will be potentially an app available that will actually have a push system to remind people what to put out that particular week, because I can see initially some chaos coming. But as long as we can get all these things in place, then I think that will be good. And that's part of the modern world. But yeah, if somebody misses their residual waste and then, you know, it's 6 weeks later, effectively they've gone without having a collection, that could be quite serious. And it will all end up coming into the recycling centres, which then affects another authority. Thank you, Chair. That's all I'll say for now. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Nichols.
Sorry, got a problem with what. I'd agree that the moving of food waste to a separate collection will be a really big step towards increasing recycling and things not going to landfill. And I feel local engagement and education about the new system is going to be really key in the first few weeks and months of it rolling out, and perhaps us as members can play a good role in that. You know, I think there was mention of a roadshow type thing to go to local communities, and because you know, it's the same thing with transferring to sustainable energy prize. If you don't get the hang of it, you're not going to implement it properly. So there's a real room there for proper engagement, I think.
Thank you. Councillor Carter.
The bit I wanted to discuss is really in the confidential bit on page 114. So I could do that now or later.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
So the bit I wanted to discuss is in page 114, which is on the confidential bit. So do you want me to discuss that now or in part 2 then?
It will need to be part 2. Whether we take it now or later is for the meeting to decide. Was it on that specific point or was it no? So, Councillor Andrews.
I'll defer to
Okay. So, what's the feeling of the meeting? Do you want to move to part 2, or do you want to continue to discuss the public items?
Just a suggestion, Chairman, if we have more of the public items and then go into part 2 if there are specific questions.
If that's how people like to proceed, that's fine. Councillor.
There does seem to be quite a lot of unknowns potentially, or potential risks about the IT. There are 2 strands. Councillor Buckmaster mentioned the app, and there's also the meshing together of the IT systems. I gather there's going to be there's a general collection one, shared one, and then we're going to keep our own sort of customer management systems. North Hearts and East Hearts having separate ones, and they're going to be meshed together. And what's the risk? Has that been assessed? Because it could spiral out of control quite, and it's still very tentative.
Yeah, it's a great question, and not a very clear answer, I'm afraid. But I think like any risks, you've got to try and think them through in terms of how they could be mitigated. And part of the recommendation this evening is wrapped around the implementation group and the working party, which will oversee implementation. and the strengthening of that board, the project board to overview implementation by having the digital transformation executive on that board. So trying to make sure that everybody who has an ability to control that risk is close to the implementation of the program, so that we can manage that risk as closely as we can. I don't think any of us who have been involved in any systems integration would want to do anything but treat it with the greatest respect, because they are hard work. There is a number in the paper which you've seen, which tries to scope it out in terms of value or cost. Whether that's the right number or not, I don't know. I'll ask for comment from my colleagues.
So obviously the shared service sits between both councils, and so both councils, as you have pointed out, have got a slightly different approach to managing the IT integration, and sort of decisions at East Herts will be being considered by the Digital Transformation Board, and to look at the best approach specifically for East Herts. But you are right, it is quite a key element to the sort of customer focused part of the mobilisation plan. What I can say is that these types of integrations are being done by councils all over the country and have been done plenty of times before with the Granicus system that East Herts operate. So it is distinctly possible to do the integrations. This isn't new ground. It's just a process at this stage of working out how and the best way for East Herts to do that integration. So we're confident it can be done. It's just about how, and obviously anything that's a complete shift for such a large customer facing service is a risk, but that's, as Councillor Hoskin has already said, is why we would like the mobilisation project board to oversee that for us.
Councillor Watson, did you want to come back on that talk? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Councillor McAndrew.
Yeah, I too am probably agreeing with the recommendations. I too am in agreement with broadly in agreement with the recommendations. However, there's a number of external factors that sort of not within our remit that we can actually control. It's government decisions. Take, for example, cartons, the distinction being made by DEFRA between different types, with some being categorised as plastics and some as fibre, with DEFRA expecting residents to sort between the two, which is completely unrealistic. And this needs to be resolved by government sort of moving forward. Also, there's recycling definitions under simpler recycling and EPR currently differ. They're in disagreement with each other. That's another area where the government's got to sort this out. Plastic films, that's another one being added to the national process by 2027. But seemingly no government assessment between now and then with respect to whether the country will be ready to collect and recycle such material on a sustainable basis. More work's needed in this area from the government. So the government's sort of saying that we've got to do certain things, but the clarity of what we've got to do and the cost impact of this, if we get it wrong, could be quite major. And I was just sort of wondering, with the purchase of the vehicles, that it's not just us here in East Herts, it's district councils throughout the country that's got to purchase new vehicles. And the manufacturers are scrambling for resources to actually manufacture these vehicles. And somebody, I think at the end of the day, the manufacturers have said to the government that they may not be able to deliver the demand that's expected of them, because there's a few suppliers that can actually do this type of work. And I was just wondering if we've had anything to say that if we haven't got the vehicles, that there's dispensation or whatever. That's it for the moment. There's a few points now. Sorry.
So during also throughout the competitive dialogue process, obviously we were keen to understand from those bidding, what their proposals were in relation to vehicles and how confident they were that they would be able to secure them for contract start. At the time of tendering, the majority of bidders were confident that they would be able to secure the majority of vehicles, and they had to demonstrate as part of the, our sort of methodology evaluation, what their alternative and contingency plans were. And although we're not discussing the specifics of bidders, they are all big players in the market, and they will have significant influence over the fleet manufacturers in relation to, provisional build slots and the like. In relation to the food waste, which is where there is anticipated to be sort of a bit more of a pinch point, one of the advantages for North Herts and East Herts moving forward with their contract procurement now is we're marginally ahead of the game, because we are actually proposing to introduce the services around 9 months before some of the other councils that are introducing, because the legislative requirement is to introduce by March 2026, and we're proposing to introduce by August 2025. So it means that we can secure those build slots slightly earlier than some of the other councils.
Thank you.
Just wonder if it's worth mentioning as well. We've been fortunate enough within North and East Herts to be part of a national trial on plastic film collection. So we have some insights into that. And in fact, we're looking to extend that trial into your bit of the world, Eric, at some stage. So there's a lot of learning there, particularly with, the residents getting on board with it, but also with our material handling, recycling facilities as well. So there's some good learning there we've been privileged to be part of.
Around vehicle use as well, a big part of the CO2 emissions is involved in the collection of waste, and I wondered if the vehicles are procured. I mean, the cost of that is enormous. Is that built in for the whole 8-year contract, or if innovation occurred in EV batteries for electric waste vehicles or something, is that something that's got margin within the contract, or other innovations that is a thing that could happen?
So yes, the contract is built around everything under 3.5 tonne being electric. So that's obviously a good start to our fleet, but most of the fleet is large HGVs around the 26 tonne mark, and the technology just isn't there at the moment. But as you're right in saying, the technology is moving forward, and we're constantly keeping an eye on that. And so we spent a lot of time talking to bidders during our competitive dialogue about how can we build in opportunity for change in the future. So yes, the natural break point will be that 8-year point, and obviously there is potential for extending this contract, but at the same time there will also be opportunity, in the contract, whether it be when we are due for additional vehicles due to housing growth, whatever, we can have another look at whether or not we're ready to have an electric RCV, or maybe even hydrogen, but I think we're even further away from that at this stage. But yeah, mechanisms in the contract are all built in so that we can explore those changes when they become viable.
I don't see any more hands. Oh, no. Councillor Clements.
So it's a relatively minor point. I broadly I'd support what we're doing here, and anything we do to raise recycling rates is good. Just a small point about the app, where it sounds like a good idea. I was amazed by the numbers that apparently East Devon have got. That sounds, gobsmacked. The report talks about, we can use it for push notifications about the bins, but also, maybe there's other things we can do for this app. And I was just wondering, are we looking at the app kind of as its own thing, just as a means of broadcasting what the council is doing, or is it only really being thought of in the sort of within the bounds of the waste contract at the moment? It feels like it could be a bigger and better thing than just bins.
So at the moment, obviously, the communications plan that's been put forward is a draft, and these things have been identified to overview and scrutiny and will be identified to executive, so that members can get a flavour of the sorts of things we're looking at. There's been no decision at this stage on whether or not an app is the decision that we want to go for, but it does obviously offer some unique advantages over other communication methods. In terms of the use of the app, obviously that very much depends on how it fits with the transformation programme of the council in general, and that's when we make those decisions about whether to invest in the app, those will be made alongside that. And certainly, I think if we went for the app, let's go for that. The priority initially will be get it set up for waste and roll forwards, but then very much there are alternative and additional options that we can use it for. And I think the communication options will be there from the outset for all services to utilise. But obviously it's a balance between making sure residents who did sign up, for example, had that opportunity to understand the sorts of messaging that was going to come forward. Most will be signing up for push notifications specifically to waste. So we need to look at, well, how much do we want to push? We don't want to annoy them too much. But obviously, reminding people about elections, planning applications, that kind of thing is all stuff that the app can do and would be explored in that process of business case building for the app.
Thank you. Sorry, you want to?
I think one of the other things which you shouldn't underestimate is the power of the binfluencer, the person on the street who always knows what bin it is to go out. And so your numbers from North Devon probably have a much more of an effect, with the sort of pyramid thing where people follow the binfluencer. So we need to reach them.
Just on the point of the different things that the app can do as well, I think Chloe touched on it briefly there around what the transformation program is doing. We are currently looking at stuff around the CRM system that the council is bringing in. So there will be a lot of work being done on that system as well, around covering different areas of the council's sort of services. So it would be, we need to be careful that we don't put all of our eggs in one basket at this point, because obviously we're developing other stuff through the transformation program, which will come to members eventually as well. So just to bear in mind that needs to be, the app needs to be thought of side by side with what we're doing with the CRM as well.
Councillor Andrews, did I see your hand?
I'd like to talk, Chairman, for a few moments around the recommendations. Recommendation A, I'm not entirely sure that this committee is in a sound and strong position to recommend the executive award the waste and recycling contract. It's a 135-page report. Graham, myself, of course Chloe, who is our lead on this, have done a lot of work as this over the years, and I certainly would hesitate to recommend that this go to the waste recycling contractor, the preferred bidder. So I suggest that we perhaps would be wise to change recommendation A to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee notes the intention of the executive to award the waste recycling and street cleansing contract, etc. Going on to B, I should prefer that it said the Overview and Scrutiny Committee encourages the executive to consider the formation of a joint mobilisation project. C, I'm at a disadvantage because I don't have access currently to the Part 2 report, so I can't talk to that at all, but it seems broadly sensible to me and I certainly support it. So moving to D, once again, it's pedantic, but it is important language. I would suggest the Overview and Scrutiny supports the executive in agreeing the commencement of procurement exercise. So modest changes, but significant, and I think they may be more significant going forward. But I think it's the job of the executive to make these decisions and not really the job of this committee on the basis of being lay people reading 135 pages of a report with 7 days notice. I think that's asking too much of us, frankly. I would ask for the committee's support for those changes and happy to read them back again. Have you got them, Peter?
Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. I must admit, I too, when I read through the recommendations, was a little bit unsure about some of the wording, as in fact Councillor Andrews has highlighted. So if Councillor Andrews were putting those forward as proposals, I'd be happy to second.
Thank you.
Indeed, Chairman, if you put
Understood. We have a proposed amendment to the recommendations, but I'd like to continue the discussion first before we put those to the vote. People are happy to do that? Nods, nobody shaking their head, which is a good sign. Would anyone else like to continue the discussion on the part 1 papers, or should we move to part 2? Councillor Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Chair. On the notes section of the communication plan, that of the name your vehicle competition and the change of FAQs on the websites, the notes are a little bit out of order, it seems. They seem to be cut off. I was just wondering if they could be expanded on.
You got a page number you could refer us
Yes,
to?
148.
Thank you. Scrolling time is allowed. I don't need to.
So for the name your vehicle competition, the notes section says competition for areas to name their collection vehicles. Will ask the public to vote on names and could lead to further spot the freighter competition. What that one says. And then changes to the FAQs. Just says details on deliveries, missed deliveries, and when you can use your new containers.
Okay. Anything further on that? Anyone else would like to contribute to this part of the discussion? No more hands? In which case, I think we're going to move to part 2. So I have some formal wording I need to read to you. Yep.
Last bit, so it's basically paragraph 5 to 7.
Okay. So I move that under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during the discussion of appendices 1 and/or 8 on the ground that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information falling within paragraphs 3 or 5 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended. Can I have a seconder for that proposal, please? Seconded. Thank you. A show of hands to indicate whether you support the motion to exclude the press and public. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That's carried. So we're going to take a moment to pause the web. Thank you very much. So we're back alive. I'd like to continue the discussion and in particular invite any comments on Councillor Andrews' proposed amendments to the recommendations, which I can recap if you'd like, but I think they're relatively straightforward. Councillor Andrews? Yeah.
Yeah, on A, it was the Overview and Scrutiny Committee notes the intention of the executive toward the waste recycling strengthening contract, etc. B, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee encouraged the executive to approve the formation, etc. And then D, Overview and Scrutiny Committee supports the executive to agree the commencement. That's what I had it as. Is that correct? Yeah. So that's the proposal. And it was seconded.
And it was seconded already. Yes, I'd like to invite discussion on that. Councillor Buckmaster.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure. I guess there might be some questions of principle, because as a scrutiny committee, we're not necessarily here to endorse what the cabinet may do. I think we can recommend to them. I know I've done that in other councils as well. And I just wonder whether a phrase ahead of A, B, C and D to say that we have, having discussed and considered the reports, we then follow on to give the recommendations. I wouldn't have any issue with that. I know that's slightly different to what David has proposed.
I'm keen to not get too many amendments, so we have to put into the mix. Things will get very complicated, but I suppose that's what we're here for. Any other comments on the proposed amendment? I think I'd like to hear Councillor Hoskin on this in particular.
Chairman, it's for the committee to discuss it, not the officers reporting to the committee.
I understand, but I can invite comment.
Yeah, I'm happy to accept your recommendations. I think the wording is not particularly significant for us at this stage. We will take all your comments and process them through into the final paper that goes through to executive. And I fully understand that it's there where the decision is made. So I'm comfortable with however you reword it.
Any other discussion on the proposed amendment?
Chairman, I don't want to complicate things further, so if everyone's happy with David, then that's fine.
Councillor Swainston.
It's just the use of the word encourages in B that seems a little strange to me. How is that different to recommend? I think recommend sounds perfectly fine there.
Councillor Andrews, did you want to reply to that?
Well, it is very different, but it could equally be the Overview and Scrutiny Committee suggests the formation of a joint mobilisation project. I'm not sure we're in a position to recommend it, but we are in a position to encourage or suggest, because it's a perfectly sensible thing to do. But it's pedantic.
Councillor Watson.
I would suggest if we're not in a position to recommend, we're hardly in a position to suggest or encourage. So we've gone round in a circle, I think. I'm quite happy with any of these words.
Councillor.
The only casualty here is clarity. Excuse me.
I merely picked up on Councillor Andrews' comments earlier in that, to me, the word recommend or recommendation has quite a specific meaning and interpretation, I believe, within council parlance, whereas suggest, encourages, whatever, are perhaps softer. And I think Overview and Scrutiny's role, I don't believe, is to make recommendations in the way I think is coming across, but we are here to support or challenge. So, again, not wanting to get into semantics, but that, well, Councillor Andrews mentioned this earlier, it kind of echoed what had gone through my own mind, which is why I was happy to support, recommend, encourage. But yeah, I'm not looking to get all hooked up on this. Thank you.
Anyone else would like to comment on the proposed amendment? Councillor.
I have a question for Councillor Andrews. It's just that if we encourage this one, would we then encourage everything from then on? Would we ever be able to recommend or suggest or indicate or yeah, 'cause there's a lot of words we can use and it could be quite fun, but also it could be very time consuming.
Do you want to respond to that? You don't have to.
It will just delay the process.
Right, I think we've kind of kicked that one around quite carefully. So I'm going to propose we move to the vote. Contentious though it may be. So I'm going to put the proposed amendment first. Do I read them out in full? Or do you want to?
You can do if you want to.
Okay, so
all
the
clear.
proposed amendment is that this committee recommendations for overview and scrutiny committee. A, that the overview and scrutiny committee notes the intention of the executive to award the waste recycling and street cleansing contract to the preferred bidder, as identified in Appendix 1, Part 2 of this report. B, that the overview and scrutiny committee encourages the executive to approve the formation of a joint mobilisation project board to include the executive members responsible for digital transformation, as well as the executive member covering waste, recycling and street cleansing services for both East Herts Council and North Herts, to monitor the progress of the mobilisation of the waste, recycling and street cleansing contract. C, that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee has regard for the draft statutory guidance in Appendix 6 and taking into account the matters set out in this Part 2 report and any Part 2 clarifications, recommends to Executive to reconfirm a decision on the 3 weekly collection frequency of residual waste collections made by the Executive as per 2.5 and provides clear reasons for the decision. D, that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee supports the Executive in agreeing the commencement of a procurement exercise for the provision of material recovery facility and haulage. We've already had a proposal and a seconder for that proposal, so I'm going to put that to the vote. So all those in favour of that amended proposal? Any against?
1, 2, 3.
And any abstentions?
2.
So that's carried. We move on. Next item on our agenda is the draft work programme. Peter, that's for you.
That's right. Yes.
Sorry, Chair. That was the vote for the amendments, wasn't it? I don't think a vote has been taken on the actual item yet.
I beg your pardon?
I think what's just happened now is the vote on the amendment, not a vote on the actual items, on the recommendations or the encouragements. So I think you still need to do that part of it.
Okay. Councillor Watson.
I propose we vote on the full thing with those amendments.
Thank you. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, James. Item 7.
Yeah, Chairman, this is the work programme report which you'll receive each meeting. And following the workshop which you all had, this picks up the matters which you raised in that, and you can find those in Appendix 1. And just to recap on what those were, in the meeting September, you're going to talk about climate change, climate emergency. Then looking ahead to the meeting in November, it was basically housing. But those are very, very broad topics. So what we really need is the scrutiny proposal forms, which you were sent after the workshop. So basically, it's your chance now to discuss the work programme more formally and then agree a bit more specifically, perhaps, or by proposal forms, what you want to look at more specifically, perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Andrews. Thank you. In seconder? Councillor Swainston, and went up slightly earlier than Councillor McAndrews. Give me a show of hands then. All those in favour of accepting the work programme? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you.
There's no urgent business.
Through you, can I just reiterate what you said a moment ago about getting those forms back to us, because obviously some of these topics are quite broad, like the housing topic, for example, is very, very broad. So if we could have some sort of narrowing of what exactly about housing you would like to scrutinise, that would be extremely helpful.
Thank you, that's understood. Right. So there are no urgent items that have been notified
Sorry,
of.
Chairman, whose job is it to get those forms in?
The email that followed the workshop identified the topic and the lead. So if that needs to be reissued, we can reissue it.
Yeah, I'm happy to send the email again, but ultimately, once the forms are filled in, back to me or Michelle, as soon as possible, please.
Councillor Swainston.
Can I just ask for some guidance on exactly how far in advance you'd like those forms in?
Well, as soon as possible, so the officers involved can start working up what it is you want to look at and start coming up with some responses and reports for you. So as soon as possible, please. Mindful the September meeting isn't all that far away.
And that's the climate change. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. There being no further urgent items, I declare the meeting closed at 8:01. Thank you very much, councillors.